ICQ Podcast Episode 300, AMSAT US with Keith Baker, KB1 Sierra Foxtrot. Well, hi everyone. Well, we've got there, episode 300 of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast. Supported this episode by Marcelino Jamali, Kilo Mike 6 Echo Alpha Yankee, an anonymous donor, and of course our monthly annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB is joined by Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, and Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief. This episode's feature is a discussion with Keith, Kilo Bravo 1 Sierra Foxtrot, and his involvement with AMSAT. Now, I can't stress enough, it's our donors that keep this show advert free, so we don't have to sell you match these and tablets and domain names and all the other gooey things that podcasts sell you. So we'd like to thank our anonymous donor. Happy 300 show and birthday. Thanks for all your efforts and enthusiasm. The show is informative and keeps me up to date with the hobby. So you're more than welcome, sir, and thank you very much for your donation. Marcelino says 73 and just wishes as well. And that's from Kilo Mike 6 Echo Alpha Yankee, formerly India Whiskey 2 India Papa India. So thanks a lot, guys, for helping us out this episode. You can pop along to icqpodcast.com/donate, where there's lots of donation options for you to show your value for the show, and more importantly, keep this show advert free. Well, now we join Martin, Chris, Dan, and Frank to discuss latest amateur radio news, including no consensus yet on the FCC symbol rate discussions and new laws coming into play in relation to distracted driving. Hope you enjoy.
Congratulations to Martin and Colin for the 300th edition of ICQ podcast. I'm on the road at the moment, lining up a new feature for a future show. I'd love to have been on the show this evening, but it wasn't possible. So this is Ed wishing the listeners all the best, and of course another 300 editions of ICQ podcast for Martin and Colin. 73.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to this episode's ICQ podcast. Episode 300, and as Frank just said to me as a pure outtake just now, oh my god, it's 300. But hopefully you'll enjoy it. This is the News Roundtable for episode 300. Tonight I'm joined by Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH. Hi Frank.
Hey, glad to be here again.
Yeah, not quite 300 for you, but a nice milestone anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. We also have Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hi there. I'm honored to be on episode number 300.
Well, to say, I never thought we were going to get here, Dan, so don't worry about it. But yeah, it's great. And Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Hello. Hi, Martin. Hi, guys. Again, nice to be on this episode. So, Martin, you must be on what, 299 out of 300 so far?
I've
Pretty
done
much 298.
I've done 299. There's only one I missed being on front of recording, and it was the first time we were in Cyprus, and in all honesty, I could have actually recorded it, but Colin found somebody to do what I do, and in the end, I actually worked a lot on the background on that and did a lot of the background stuff that I normally do, so I was involved with all 300, but I've only appeared on 299. So my 300th is next episode, Chris.
What a milestone, eh?
Yeah, yeah. But what an enjoyable milestone.
Yeah.
And guys, you're going to hear from some of the other guys shortly about what their thoughts of our 300th are. But let's start with our news stories. And quite honestly, these might be good ones. It might be me throwing a hand grenade in the room and sitting back and watching Dan and Frank discuss, I should say. And they're both smiling. Now, we got no consensus reached on the FCC symbol rate issue. Now, our feeling was, why the hell can't they sort this out? Go on, Dan, why can't they sort it out?
You know, this is really an interesting thing from a lot of different angles, which we talked about before or earlier. But you know, there's just so much here in one issue. So in one of my opinions on this is that I don't think that amateur radio as a whole really has their arms around this. I mean, I don't think we've all thought out all the implications of, which way we're going to go on this. If we go this way, what's going to happen? If we go that way, what's going to happen? And so that lack of technical understanding of this is part of the problem. Another part of this issue is, it seems to be, that the ARRL's loss of influence on this. I mean, they convened the meeting, they tried to get people to the table and agree on something, but it didn't happen. Well, why is that? In the past, maybe the ARRL strong-armed people and came to consensus, but they couldn't do it on this issue. So it's just a lot of things going on here. It's quite interesting to see.
Well, you be careful, Dan, because you could end up being the chairman for this, because I'd vote for you.
No, they wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole.
You don't know. They probably love you, really. I know Frank loves you, and he's part of the ARRL, aren't you, Frank?
Yes. I agree with what Dan said. I would sort of add this. It's an interesting study on the evolution of technology, because I've heard some other people who know more than I do about this. Now, bear in mind, not all of us do digital, like not all of us do CW, not all of us, do phone, although I guess phone is probably the broadest mode. I may be wrong about that, but I think voice is probably the broadest mode. So you have to keep in mind the digital part is something that not everybody does. And if you don't do it, then, you don't have that experience in it. But I think that when the symbol rate was first invoked way back when, it was a way to try to manage the bandwidth used. And like some decisions made early, it can have far-reaching and long-term consequences. I may be wrong about that, but I've heard some people who know more than I do about this say that, that was kind of an unfortunate choice. Dan's point is, I think, impeccable. We don't have enough broadly held, widely acknowledged knowledge about what the hell is the problem, to just be blunt. And we've had then Ted Rappaport submitted his request to the FCC, had some issues regarding whether or not there was effective encryption. And I say effective because it required some hardware and some stuff to be able to decipher it. And that always kicks, up a bee's nest, whether someone uses digital or not, just the idea of encryption. Martin, if you want to really do a hand grenade, throw out the issue of encryption in a group and just sit back and listen. And then, or throw out, how do you ground your ham shack? Now, either of those are going to get people just waving their arms and going on. And to some degree, we've had this. I tried to get Ted Rappaport on this podcast in an interview, but he was too busy. And I thought his petition needed a fair hearing. He was getting attacked by those who kind of WinLink aficionados and some things like that. So I think Dan hit the nail on the head. We said this in a previous episode of this podcast. There's not enough known collectively, that is out in the open, kind of explained and that kind of thing. Now, we can bang on the ARRL for not doing that, since they sort of have the bully pulpit. My read from someone who's an ARRL flunky in the Delta Division and talking with my director, Dave Norris, is that this pullback for a 60-day pause is their effort on their initial misfire, as Dan might have characterized it, that they couldn't get consensus. So I think you let's just stop, take a step back, and let's try to see if we can reconnoiter and get more information. Anyway, sorry to be long-winded on that, but it's just a mess right now.
Yeah, I'd rather you be long-winded on that, because I'm sure Chris and I are not fully aware of this. You got anything you want to say, Chris, on it?
Not massively. I think it just needs some time, doesn't it? I think it needs some people to get together and sort it out and figure out the band plan, figure out whereabouts the digital things can sit without causing interference to others, maybe. I think it just needs a bit of sitting down, doesn't it, and getting people to sit down at a table and thrash it out and come up with something. Really, it sounds like that's not happened yet.
Yeah, well, I mean, from an easy point of view, but this is probably so easy that it's never going to happen. Guys, you just need to get around the table, work out what amount of traffic is in each of these modes, and if you've got a massive area of bandwidth with hardly any traffic in it, shrink it down a bit, allocate to other new modes that are coming up, sort your band plan out, so that things like WinLink are not interfering with CW or whatever, and just say, as of this date, this is our new band plan. Or am I being too simple, guys?
If it were only that simple.
Hey, I'll come over and sort it, right?
Okay. So it's not going to be me being in charge of the.
I got to be honest.
You.
This sounds worse than Brexit, doesn't it?
Hey, this is the second night Chris has seen me in grumpy go for it mode, so
I have to get Boris Johnson in to fly me over, get him to sort it. I'm sure he can fix it for us. I'm getting political now.
No,
well, Mark, one thing I
keep
would
our eye on this. No doubt about it. I don't think this is the last time this is going to hit the ICQ podcast.
yeah, and Martin, I would just tag this PS on there. If you think we're frustrated a little bit, or maybe you and Chris are frustrated from across the pond, think of how the FCC must feel, because this isn't a big deal for them. This is just bandwidth for amateurs. And guys, make up your mind. But what's reasonable here, and what's consistent with Part 97, or how do we need to modify Part 97? But
that's really an excellent point. I mean, if the FCC was really interested, they would have got in there and said, "Hey, this is the way it's going to be." But they don't care.
Yeah, but it's really, I mean, in fairness, surely the FCC give you a block of frequencies, whatever it is. Let's say 40 meters between 7 megs and 7.3 in the States, right? They give you a block of frequencies. You guys decide what you want in your band plan in the middle of that. You then set the rules. That's fine. So all the FCC can really do is say, you can have these frequencies, or you can't have these frequencies. And as you say, Dan, they don't care what you do between 7 and 7.3. They wouldn't care if you decided tomorrow that all CW was going to be at the top end of the band instead of the bottom end of the band. Immaterial, really. But we have to, as a gentleman's agreement, work out how we want to use it, I would suggest.
Well, I'm hopeful that this kind of ceasefire, if you will, by the ARL is an attempt to get people back at the table with some coherence. As Dan said, we will see. We'll stay tuned.
Yeah, well, I think some people will probably think I was being a little bit tongue-in-cheek on this, but I really do feel that the only way to sort this thing out is for somebody to take control. You can't always have a committee deal with everything. I mean, the story of a camel was a horse designed by a committee. You've got to sometimes make that decision and at least put the stakes in the ground and at least start something. You can always revise it afterwards. Anyway, so says I. Next news story. High school students in Brazil build QO100 ground station, and this is to receive the geostationary satellite. We were quite surprised that Brazil was actually able to receive it. Chris, you looked up the map on this one, didn't you?
Well, I did a quick Google, and it's right on the very edge of reception. So, but yeah, clearly they can get into it, or so they can hear it, which is what they've done. So yeah, it's part of this STEM education project. And I think actually this ticks the boxes. So STEM, I had to Google that as well. So that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. I think that ticks most of those boxes, isn't it? Building this, that's pretty good, and all credit to them for doing that. I think if I was at school and listening to satellites and building something to do that, I'd be quite excited.
Yeah, and it's something that's going to stay with them for years. I mean, they're not going to be school age unless they're really into radio. They're not going to be understanding radio at the levels we do. but it's certainly a building block. It certainly would stimulate them to a great length, I think. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Oh, I think this is a great project. It's almost too bad the U.S. isn't part of the footprint, because this would be really a good project for these STEM schools, which are popping up all around the U.S.
Yeah, well, as I say, lots of things may or may not happen. And when I was talking to the gentleman, Keith Baker, who's in our feature, he was trying to explain a little bit to me the costs of putting up a satellite to do this sort of thing. And unless you can piggyback on the back of something else, costs are phenomenal. So you may not get one just yet, Dan, but I think they probably like it. Frank, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'm intrigued by it, and I'm a kind of a would-be champion, I guess, of the STEM activities like this. When you look at what the station consists of, it's a little 1.2 meter dish antenna, which is kind of the reflector. They've got a little LNB if you're in the States and you've got DirecTV or Dish or something, these little small pizza size satellite systems for television like I do here. That little LNB is the thing that sits in the middle of it like a flower pistol, and the LNB is pointed back at the dish, so it actually gets the reflected signal off the dish. So you got one of those guys. There's a homemade bias T to feed power up to that LNB, and then a little RTL SDR dongle, and then the SDR Sharp software that AirSpy is the proprietor that puts that out for free. That's basic parts, be putting it together, but you got to understand what a bias T is. You got to understand what a high frequency signal is. And it's not like a huge room of things. It's like a little chemistry set, and you make some neat stuff. It either smells terrible or it makes smoke or it turns blue to pink or, all those cool things. And I just think it's a wonderful concept because some of these kids could get together later and build another one fairly easily. And I think anytime you can replicate those things, you don't know what they're going to do 20 years from now in their career because of this. I think I may have wet my pants the first time I saw a Geiger counter when I was a kid. That was just about the coolest thing I'd ever seen. So I just think this is wonderful.
And on that, Frank, I was thinking the same. They've got some really simple components, so you can get, an RTL receiver is what, $10-$20.
Maybe, yeah.
The other parts, I don't know what the dish costs, but I'm thinking $100 probably maximum price to put this together. And it's probably quite, once someone's done it and done the hard work and figured out how to do it, it's probably quite repeatable. You could, write some instructions and say, guys, other schools, you get involved. And it's nice to also see they've had amateurs involved. So they've had 3 amateurs there that have helped as well, which is great. So, we're really kind of involved in the community, which is good. So, no, it's I think it's a nice story.
Yeah. And the other thing is that, a couple of times in my life, I've been involved with projects that if I'd have known more about it before I start, I probably would have panicked and never gone forward. But sometimes you start these things in ignorance of, let's do it. And you come out with the far end. And I would suggest sometimes that this is the case. I mean, our classic example were, all right, 300 ICQ podcasts. I had no broadcast background. Yeah, you laugh, Dan, but it's true. Number two,
yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
Number two was GB3 XP repeater. If we'd have known now what at the start of the project, there's no way would GB2 XP have been a VHF repeater or any. We probably would have never done it. But sometimes when you start a project and you have enthusiasm, you move forward. And I think that's what these group of people are going to get out of it, is the enthusiasm and the knowledge of what they got from it.
Martin, I will tell you this from a career as a college professor. I had an ironclad rule. I never, ever told undergraduates anything was hard. PhD students, yes. But I never told an undergraduate, hey, this is going to be difficult. Because you just want to let them play.
Yeah. And sometimes they think out the box. I mean,
Absolutely.
I remember a group of our youngsters at the club sitting there with a TS2000 and a mobile phone decoding slow scan TV. I wouldn't have thought about holding the mobile phone next to the speaker to decode slow scan TV. Would now, because I've seen it done, but that's thinking outside the box. So these school projects and what the youngsters do, I think, are very, very good. And I'd love to have been doing this sort of thing when I was at school. But hey, then we don't. This one I feel very strong about, and I think it's very important, this next news story. Distracted driving measures may new state laws effective from August the 1st. So what they're effectively saying is, don't use your mobile phone while you're driving. There are some horrible incidents of accidents on the internet, not just in Minnesota, but all over the world. And we are international. And I do sound like an old fuddy-duddy moaning about this, but be careful, please. What do you think, Frank?
Well, I totally agree with you. As I said in the rehearsal session, I used hands-free in my pickup truck, and I'm fairly sensitive to this. And I think we typically get an exemption, in particular in amateur radio, and as we do here. The language of the story, which we noted, is that you can use a GPS or a nav system, but it's only one that's capable of only being that. In other words, my iPhone with Google Maps or Apple Maps would be a no-go there in Minnesota. So the language as it's written always reflects some of the legislative negotiation process and what interest groups kind of get into that. Because someone could be on their phone and they could say, oh, yeah, but I have my maps open, therefore, I was okay. Well, they had to restrict that, keep the non-texting. And I know where I live, I see so many drivers that either people honk at them when the light turns green to go and they are oblivious to it. Why? They're texting. And so I'm all for these kind of laws and regulations.
Agree 100% with you. And even though this law is saying that two-way radio, CB and amateur radio could be exempt from the rules, in many ways, operating hands-free while you're mobile, is so much easier and much more enjoyable. Would you not say, Chris?
Yes, and it's funny because, I think we've all, well, I certainly have in the past, used a phone. I'm probably guilty of it in the past, and you genuinely are. You don't think at the time you are, but you actually genuinely are not considering what you're doing. And I think you're right. Even with a handset, even with a mobile radio, and even though it's simplex, you're not having a two-way conversation, so to speak. You were talking one at a time. You are still having to hold something in your hand. You're not fully concentrating on driving. So actually, I have to agree that even for two-way radio, having hands-free does make things a lot safer. You're much more in control. You're not having to hold something, or you're able to use all of your faculties to control the vehicle. So no, I agree that it's sensible. And in fact, certainly here in the UK, penalties here for using your phone while driving. You now get 6 points and quite a large fine. So they take it very seriously these days, don't they? I think the research obviously shown that bears out that I think they were saying that it's almost as dangerous as drinking and driving, isn't it? I think using a phone while driving. So I think based on that, you have to take it seriously, don't you?
You certainly do. And for the guys in the state, the point system, if you get to 10, you lose your license. So 6.
I think it's 12. I think it's 12 miles. But yeah, if you get to you get done for that twice, you basically lose your license for 6 months. So it's pretty serious.
It's pretty serious. And I used to talk. I often talk to Chris on my way home from the club, and I used to guarantee that Chris would always pass it back to me if I didn't have hands-free, while I was approaching a big roundabout, and I got gear changes to do, and I've got steering and indicators, and I got a mic in the hand. Horrible way to drive, not enjoyable. Dan, what's your thoughts?
Well, we've had a similar law here in Michigan for quite a while now, and I don't know if there's been any studies about how effective it's been, but I used to write a lot about automotive testing and stuff like that. And distracted driving was what the article I wrote a while back. And it's just a major cause of accidents. And I'm surprised it's taken Minnesota so long to pass a similar law.
I think we're all in agreement on this one, and in fairness, it's a very, very good thing to be. Our next news story, I picked this one up off the ARRL website, and I know Chris has actually got one. But the new Raspberry Pi 4 has been reported as having problems with certain USB-C cables. Probably because they're the cheap, nasty ones, Chris, I'd suggest. But
So yeah, I actually ordered this on the day. In fact, I ordered a Raspberry Pi 3 the week before the Raspberry Pi 4 came out because it wasn't, obviously they'll announce it for when things are going to get released. So I ordered it on the day. I actually ordered the Raspberry Pi 4 on the day it was announced, and because they were actually quite, there was quite a big run on them. They sold out quite quickly, so I was quite actually lucky to get one. So I got the 4 GB. So the new Raspberry Pi 4 is a bit more powerful than the old versions. It's got more memory. There are 3 models now. I think there's a 1, a 2, and a 4 GB version. It's now got Bluetooth, Wi-Fi. It's got gigabit Ethernet. It's got USB 3 now. So basically, it's got a quad core ARM 1.5 GHz CPU. It's still the same size as the original Raspberry Pi. It's still a credit card size little device, but there's an awful lot of technology on that little board, and they got to the point now where they just cannot provide sufficient power for all that technology with a mobile phone charger. So the older versions of the Raspberry Pi 3 and below used to use a micro USB connection to power it, so you could get your mobile phone or your cell phone charger. I think it need to be 2 amps. You need to be able to provide 2 amps of current to power that device. The Raspberry Pi 4 that just doesn't cut it. You now need to have a 3 amp power supply. And it's now, rather than micro USB, it's now using USB Type-C connector for its power. And I think what's been reported here is that some of those cables just aren't up to it. And it does draw a lot of current. It does draw, I'd say a lot. It's not like a desktop PC, but it's drawing a lot more than the older versions. And I think what they're saying is some of the cables just can't quite deliver that amount of current. So when I bought mine, I actually had trouble finding a 3 amp USB power supply. So I actually then ended up buying the official Raspberry Pi 1. And obviously that does meet the spec. And another note, so I've been playing with mine, and it's a great device. It's virtually as powerful as a desktop PC. Now it's perfectly adequate as a web browser. You can use it for checking your email or checking the data cluster, or looking at Facebook, that sort of thing. It's perfectly adequate for all of that. You can use it for your kind of office type things, the spreadsheet and the web browser. It's perfectly adequate for all of that. The only thing I would say is it does get quite hot. Compared to the older versions, then this new model does get quite a lot of components on the board. Do get quite hot. In fact, I actually bought the official Raspberry Pi 4 case, and inside the case, it actually overheats. So I think there's a slight design problem there in terms of there's not enough cooling around it. I think it needs a fan or something. I think I'll need something to keep it cool. So I actually have to have the case open. But yes, I'm not surprised that the cheap and cheerful cables don't work so well, because it does need 3 amps of power, but it's a good device.
yeah, right. Well, as I say, I knew you had one, so you'd be able to give us a bit more background to it. I did find it on the AWR website. Dan, are you likely to ever use a Raspberry Pi 4?
Well, we just had a club presentation on the Raspberry Pi 4 a couple of weeks ago, and man, I think this is probably a pretty cool device. I mean, it sounds like really it has the power now to really run your shack and all that stuff, and I'm anxious to do it. This is a little hiccup. Everybody has these kind of weird little design problems, and if that's the only thing that's problem with this design, I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, as I say, I have a Raspberry Pi 3 running at the back of my desk into the switch box, and I forget it's there most of the time. But every now and again I switch it on and use it, and or switch to it with the keyboard switch. And I always thought the Raspberry Pi 3 was good, and I know that it's been used in various other devices for amateur radio, so that's good. Frank, you do a lot with this sort of type components. Is this one going to be mega use to you?
Yes, it will. Now, I will tell you that the USB-C cable that has a problem with it is one that's electronically marked. And we've had problems with the USB, the serial adapters with regard to the FTDI chip. There were some fakes and things. It's not the same thing, but it's sort of like that in the sense that there's an electronic marking on the ones that say Apple uses that they're trying to help you folks. That's all they're trying to do. They're trying to say, does this thing need power or not? So that if the external device doesn't need power, then it's not going to put power out there. So,
Right.
Again, it's just trying to help you, but you have to keep that in mind. What I've got in mind for this is part of my MCOM portable gear is a small box that's waterproof that will have one of these in it as the CPU engine, but have a screen that will track APRS and stuff. So when we're out with an MCOM scenario, even if it's just kind of a bike race and we've got APRS trackers, you've got a portable box that's got an APRS station in it for net control. And this will be perfect for it because it will do several other tasks. It's got enough power. Coming up with the quad-core CPU and the 4 gigs of RAM, that's a sweet spot where a lot of things can happen once you get to 4 gigs of RAM. So I think if you just beware of your cabling, I don't see any real hesitancy. As Chris said, everything's going to get hot the more you push it. So having some ventilation and things like that. And I've already got a lot of the parts to put this together, and it's good timing. I'll probably order a Raspberry Pi 4 here in the next month or so to move on with that project.
Yeah.
And actually, Frank, just having reread the article, you're absolutely right. The issue isn't with cheap cables; it's ones that have been electronically marked, which it's almost some kind of smart cable, and essentially it's trying to identify what's on the end of the cable. And what's happening is that it thinks what it's talking to is an audio device, not something that requires power, and therefore the power adapter doesn't deliver power. So it's actually designed to do that, but it's almost just misidentifying the device. That's all.
Now, help us remember collectively, what's the U on USB stand for?
That'll be universal.
Yeah, so now we've got from universal to specialty, right? You got to know whether it's
absolutely. It's a good point. Yes.
Yeah, well, as I say, that's interesting. And while you guys have been talking, my brain's been ticking over. I know it doesn't work very well most of the time, but I seem to remember we hit this problem with the Raspberry Pi 2 because that needed a 1 amp charger, and back in the day, the majority of phone cables and USB 1 was only 500 milliamps. So getting the right charger is not necessarily the wrong thing to do.
And they do point out that the official Raspberry Pi charger costs $8, so it's not an expensive thing to just go and buy one just for this device, which within no works.
True, it's not gonna stop your project. So right thing for the right job, I'd say. Anyway, last news story as we move towards the end. Dan put this one in. Millions of AMPRNet internet addresses have been sold to fund grants for scholarship. It's an interesting discussion. I think this one might be the hand grenade in the room between Dan and Frank. But over to you, Dan.
Another one. Not two in the same night. Come on.
Yeah, for some reason you got me all riled up this week, Martin. So if you'll allow me to introduce this item. So recently, I would say a bunch of hams have been kind of shocked by the news that 4 million IP addresses that were formerly allocated to the amateur radio service were sold. They were sold to Amazon for, I don't think it's been said how much yet, but apparently it's like $1 million at least. A lot of money.
Several million, according to the story.
Yeah, so several $1 million, and that just came as a total shock to the ham radio community. This block of addresses has been very nicely administered by this group, ARDC, and for the last 40 years almost here now. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, we're selling off a bunch of it for millions of dollars. And I don't want to like be raise a red flag here, because everything might turn out just fine in the end. In fact, probably will. But it's just was such a big shock to everybody, and because so little is known about this group, ARDC, and that's just the issue here, is the sort of the lack of transparency, if you will, or lack of information floating around about the group and what they plan to do with the money.
And they sold them to Amazon, didn't they, Dan?
Right. So this block of addresses was sold to Amazon.
Yeah. So let's. Well, we won't ask Budgie to comment since he works for Amazon, but he's not.
Yeah, he's not with us today anyway.
That's true.
No wonder he's on vacation in Cyprus.
Yeah. No, he's not in Cyprus, but he's on a nice Greek beach somewhere, I believe.
I
see. Nice.
So here's another interesting thing, is that I've been to the ARDC website. ARDC stands for Amateur Radio Digital Communications, and they're a 501c3 group. And it looks like after they made the sale, they sort of hurriedly tried to update their website to show some things and how this is going to be a good thing for ham radio. But under the giving tab on the giving page, here's what it says: preliminary content. This page is still under construction. Each year, ARDC intends to award X million dollars in grants to organizations, blah, blah, blah. So all this is, so new that they don't even have their website updated yet.
So my take on this is that I think they come under some pressure. I think they've been holding this massive allocation. If we go back to the 1980s, they've been allocated a huge Class A, area of IP addresses, a huge number of something like 16 million IP addresses, and clearly more than was required. And I think that something's happened. Maybe they've been offered some money. Maybe someone's thought, oh, hang on a minute, we can do a deal here. We can, a few $1 million to get hold of that. Actually, given that there is a shortage of IP addresses out there, and some of these cloud companies would pay a lot of money for it. They decided to do that, and they said, well, let's just do the deal. Perhaps they don't need that. I mean, I don't know how many they actually use, but I guess in the days when, back in the 80s, when these things were happening, people didn't know what the future was, and perhaps it's a little bit clearer now what their requirements were, and perhaps the ARDC's mission has changed from being one specifically to do with digital communications, and perhaps now they're a bit more philanthropic, if that's the right word. Becoming they've now suddenly got a huge amount of money in the bank account, and maybe they can do something a little bit different, maybe equally as useful to our community, but in a different way.
Well, if you allow me the thing to throw another hand grenade in Rube, Dan, you said that last year they had something like £17,000 or $17,000 worth of expenses. This sounds a bit like the Beverly Hillbillies, where Jed Clampett shot a hole in the ground, got oil, and suddenly was very rich.
Yeah, and so as far as transparency goes, they've done a good job. All their financial statements are online. Their letter of 501c3 acceptance. They are a 501c3 group, and all that's there, so you can see that, and all that's good. But yeah, in their 2018 financial statement shows they had total expenses of $17,000. So they're going to go from $17,000 to millions of dollars in a flash. So we'll see. We'll see how that works.
Yeah. Frank, you've been very quiet. Come on.
Well, let me see if I can help our readers, or listeners rather, out a little bit. The thing about IP addresses, now my background was back in 1983. I developed 3 computer networks that were available in 60 countries when I was on the faculty at North Carolina State University. And that was before the internet was around. AMPRNet, which was a group of defense contractor universities and some others, were developing some of these technologies. But the only thing that was out there were called packet switch carriers. And GTE had one called Telenet, and another company whose name I forget had one called TimeNet, or TYMNNET. So back for just a few years, I had these 3 networks, and, there was a dial-up on a modem, and you used a credit card, and there's a company in Cambridge, Massachusetts called General Videotex. They had a competitor to CompuServe called Delphi. And so we ran on a 6-pack of deck Vaxes up in Cambridge. Now, I'm saying that because of this. I was aware when the Internet Protocol addressing stuff was getting developed. And just like the telephone system, if you're in the States or if you're not in the States and you're going to call the U.S., you use a 1 as a prefix and then you dial whatever your number is. And there is an international group of organizations that monitor that, and they hand these numbers out and all this kind of stuff. Well, it's the same kind of thing with IP addresses, Internet Protocol addresses, which are kind of like the telephone numbers of the Internet. And the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority, IANA, as it's commonly called, we'll have a link in the show notes, is the international body that kind of manages this. And for North America, U.S., Canada, and some Caribbean islands, ARIN, ARIN, is the body that that manages those and where internet service providers get, their IP address assignments. Well, back some 40 years ago, actually at the behest of the ARRL, there was a couple of people, one guy named Harold McNusky, says, hey, this is going to be relevant to amateur radio down the pike. And the ARRL probably said something like, oh, yeah, well, why don't y'all get together and figure it out and advise us? So, in fact, they did. They used to meet with ARRL and another group, computer networking group. And then they wound up doing just like what the ARRL did for repeater coordinators. They go start a nonprofit. They did an MOU with the FCC, with the group in Nebraska that's now defunct, to do repeater coordination. All right, well, the same thing happened with this group. And so we've got this group went out and requested 16 million IP addresses almost 40 years ago. And we know that they sold them recently to Amazon because on a Wikipedia page, it lists a lot of these blocks of IP addresses and who has them. People like the U.S. Postal Service, Comcast, Prudential Securities, Dan up in your neck of the woods, Ford Motor Company, AT&T, and so on and so on. It says the 44.Z block, part of it, 44.192, was sold to Amazon on July 18th. So why would Amazon want some of these? Well, as I recall, they had this almost humorous sounding loon project where they were going to float balloons around the world and provide internet access to underserved parts of the world. Well, what do you need besides balloons? You got to have a telephone number. They need IP addresses. So here is AMPRNet having a lot of these IP addresses. Well, now these are IP4 addresses. And so we're running out of those, or we're projected to run out of them overall. Well, here's this pocket of unused ones. And so this ARDC says, we're allocating them, but we don't think we're ever going to allocate all of the 16 million that we have by the time everything converts over to IP6. So, Amazon perhaps approaches them, says, we'll give you some money. They go, we're not going to use it. So I got a big loaf of bread. I can sell part of it. Now, whether that proves to be good or bad, I think it remains to be seen. And we will see. But suddenly, as Dan has kind of indicated, they have several $1 million, and they're opening up as a 501c3. That's you don't pay taxes on stuff because you're doing something for the good of society, and you articulate what all that good stuff is. Now they're going to add some more good stuff. And they're going to give grants to other qualified 501c3 organizations with regard to education, research, and development spectrum, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we'll see where all that goes. But we can look at their Form 990 as a 501c3 organization, see how they've spent their money, how they're governed, and in general, what they're going to do with it. So that's kind of a broad picture for it. And I think we can go back and forth on whether or not this is a good thing on behalf of amateur radio or not. I think Dan's right in that we ought to always have a bit of healthy skepticism regarding transparency. So that's my 2 cents on it.
So your comparison to the repeater coordination is really apt here. right? Let's hope that this doesn't go the way of that, right?
I hope so, because and I've already done one presentation on it. We don't have that body in Nebraska anymore, so it's up in the air as to who can say you're a coordinating body or not. So
Right.
yeah, and we'll see where this goes. I'm a little more optimistic that this is going to turn out okay than I am the repeater coordination stuff. That's another story.
Yeah, and I am too. But yeah, we'll all keep an eye on them.
I put several links in, and Colin will have them on the show notes. I think our listeners can kind of look up and see what we're talking about if they're not familiar with it. I got familiar with it because of my early experience, but then later as I got into the high-speed multimedia mesh stuff, it used IP addresses requested from AMPRNet. And I think, Dan, you've got some friends who did something similar.
Yeah, we're setting up an AMPRNet here in Ann Arbor.
So I think at the end of the day, it's happened. We didn't need those IP addresses. They've been sold off. If it all goes the way that we believe it should, amateur radio should benefit from it. And all we're saying is the website needs to be a little bit more transparent at the moment, because it's leading to people asking questions, I'd suggest. Is that fair?
Fair enough.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, well, that completes the news stories for episode 300. Now I'm going to ask you guys what you've been up to in amateur radio since the last time. Let's start with Dan.
Okay. So 2 weekends ago, I went up north. We say go up north here. That means go up to northern Michigan somewhere. And my mission was to try out my portable operation so that I could take part in the National Lighthouse and Lightship Weekend, which is coming up this coming weekend. And it was a total failure. I forgot to take some stuff like coax to connect the antenna to the radio. I laugh every time I think about it. So last weekend I did another dry run at a local park, which went a lot better. I made some nice contacts, and I think I'm all set for National Lighthouse and Lightship Weekend next week. And I hope folks will listen for W8L. Of course, you won't hear this till it's almost over. Well, anyway, I'll be W8L from the Point O'Bark Lighthouse in the tip of the thumb in Michigan.
Yeah, that's good, Dan. And drop Colin an email because he does send out information between the shows. So if you want to, we can publicise you'll be on the air.
And then, out of interest, are you operating CW or phone modes?
Well, I probably do a little of both.
Okay, cool.
Do a little of both.
Yeah. So, Chris, I'm going to get you to go next because you and I haven't. I didn't spend time on the Belfast because I spent time with the lovely Mrs. B. So, what have you been up to?
Well, we had a very busy HMS Belfast actually a couple of weeks ago. Myself and Tim were up there. It's only two of us, which is probably not quite enough people to be able to operate the radios and talk to the public. So we did a lot of talking to the public and not that much operating on the radios. But it was great fun. It's now the summer holidays here, so the schools are out, and we had a queue at the door of kids doing more certificates. So that was great. What else have I been up to? So I've got my new IC 7300, which is a fantastic radio. I've been playing with that and like it a lot. I'm probably not going to get rid of my Yaesu though, so I've still got my Yaesu FTDX 3000 in the shack, and that's probably going to stay there. I've got that set up quite nicely. I've got all the computer and things set up to it, so that works pretty well. But I do like the icon as well, so I'm a little bit. I'm playing with both, but and yeah, FT8. So it's a lot easier to get FT8 working with something like that radio than it is with the Yaesu. So I've been playing with FT8 a little bit. And made a few contacts. I've got to be honest, I find it a little bit boring because there's no actual talking. It's just an automatic. It's quite cool for you to watch it happen a few times, but actually after a while, it's like, yeah, click there, yeah, okay, done that. So I might do it again, but if I'm being brutally honest, it's a little bit boring. So
try JS8 call. You might like that a little bit better.
Oh yes, that might be my next thing to do. I'll play with some of the other modes that have come part of that that software. So yeah, I've been making a few contacts on HF. I am enjoying that new radio, and I'm still not sure I've figured everything out on it yet, but it's got a really nice interface. I'm really pleased with the way that it works. All the touchscreen stuff is all quite new to me, but it's a nice piece of kit. Listen, and I'm going to listen out for Dan on W8L from the Point Oak Lighthouse.
Point Obark.
That's the one. Yeah.
So, all in all, you've been doing well then, Chris, and glad you enjoyed your new radio.
Actually, and of course, I'm Dejan now telling your Thunder Martin. We also had a little go on DMR, didn't we, as well?
Oh, yeah. And
Well,
it
I'll let you cover that in your bit, maybe.
Well, all right then. I think we were only about 10 feet apart.
Yeah, to be fair.
No, to be fair, though, we were 10 feet apart, but we were working up through a repeater that was about 10 miles away, so
It was a
just proving it worked.
Yeah.
So, Frank, you've been busy, I believe.
I have been. I've been going to too many funerals, 3 in the last 2 weeks. But, that's part of life, particularly when you get over 60 years of age. 2 things, really, 2 major things. I've been working with Riley Hollingsworth with the new volunteer monitor program, a bit of organizational work. What are some technologies by which that particular group can deal with interference, malicious or otherwise, and doing the HF piece, and then looking at, VHF, UHF piece. We get some people that want to interfere with repeaters and some things like that. We had someone in Chicago that for well over a year, was interfering with a repeater, and they started using Doppler on it, and it was moving, and they couldn't quite figure it out. Well, they finally caught him with an HT and a backpack on a bus, and that's why it was moving. So it can be very challenging. So Riley's asked me to work with him, and I've been doing a good bit of work on that. Now, the other thing I've been working on, and Martin, you've been a direct part of that along with Colin, is the new Humber Heroes Award program. That came out of our lunchtime conversations up in Xenia. I don't know if the sun was too hot and crazy ideas came out or what have you, but the Humber Heroes Award program is an annual award that we'll try to lift up and point some sunshine on someone who's done something terrific in the homebrew sector of our hobby, focusing on amateur radio. The website homebrewheroes.org has been live for a bit. I have a little soft spot for these folks at ARDC not getting their website fleshed out, just because I've been doing things like that myself. But we've got 2 commercial prize sponsors that have come on. Digilent, which is a National Instruments company, has committed to giving an Analog Discovery 2 device to our annual recipient. It's a Swiss Army knife test gear, type of thing that's USB connected to your computer. And I have one, had one for over a year. I think it's delightful. We also had Siglent come aboard, and they're donating one of their most popular digital oscilloscopes. And we've got some other manufacturers for test gear and related stuff that have indicated some interest. I was invited by Bob Howell to appear on the Ham Nation podcast, and I think episode 411, they made that the feature story, and was able to talk about what we've been doing, Martin and Colin, with the Humber Heroes Award. And so we've got an anonymous selection committee that will have a difficult challenge to identify someone for this first one in succeeding years. So that's been a little bit of a challenge. Still doing some public development work with vendors on that, and we'll see where it goes. But Martin, what's your thoughts on that? You're directly involved as being one of the 3 members on the steering committee, and the ICQ podcast is our promotional sponsor.
Well, Frank, I think one of the biggest problems the people that are going to choose this homebrew hero are going to have is that there are so many people out there doing some really interesting things. And in fairness, our hobby is alive and well, and it's going to be a very difficult one to choose. However, the winning recipient, is going to feel proud that he's won it, because there are a lot of good good people out there. So, yeah, we're happy
Could be a she, Martin. Could be a she.
Could be a she. Yeah. My apologies.
If you'll notice our website, the hero is a heroine, a woman with a soldering iron. I intentionally put that up there to kind of raise the specter of there are many women who are in this as well.
Surely not ladies in amateur radio. Surely not.
Oh, there's a few in amateur radio. So yeah, it's I think it's generated a lot of interest, and as I say, we're happy to promote the project you've been working on, Frank, through the ICQ podcast. So that's good. So anything else you've been up to?
Oh, nothing worth chatting about, really. Just kind of same old, same old.
All right. Well, I'm not gonna mention names today, but a few things that I know that are happening. Matthew will be back with us. Says he doesn't going to mention names, but Matthew, you know about. Matthew's going to be back with us from episode 301, so that's good news. Dan and I have been talking to another potential presenter, and if that person agrees, they will join us as well, probably on episode 301. So we're looking forward to that. That is a teaser for you, because I'm not going to tell you who it is. I've also been talking to one of the groups in the UK, one of the big ham groups in the UK, and one of their members has offered to do a feature for us on every 4 to 6 weeks basis. So quite happy with that, because he's a very knowledgeable guy, and they do lots of interesting stuff, so imparting it back to everybody will be good. I've done a couple of really good interviews, I think. I did the one for this episode with Keith Baker of AMSAT. I found that very enjoyable. I also recorded already the feature for episode 301. So, Chris, you won't be able to say to me, so what is it, Martin? And I say, I ain't got a clue. On the day before the release.
Well, what is it? But Martin, what is it?
I can't tell you, it's a secret now. Going forward, I've been repairing all sorts of broken things here and enjoying myself fixing bits and pieces. Monday night just gone, we had what we called a bit of a field night. Instead of going to the Scout Hall, unfortunately the Scout Hall was closed. So we went to Epsom Downs, where their big horse race course is, parked up on the side of that. There must have been 15 to 20 people there, all with doing slightly different things. And I did an impersonation of Edmund, really. Edmund has a thing of going out with a small Yagi and a handheld and on 77. So I did pretty much the same. And Edmund turned up, which was nice to see Edmund. I've done a hell of a lot of DMR over the last few weeks, because I've been trying to sort out a code plug. And Chris and I, as I say, had a contract the other day. Chris has now got my code plug in his radio, although it's changed a bit more since yours, Chris.
Okay.
I've done a fair amount of Fusion and straight FM. But all in all, I've had a great lot of fun. But the only thing I'm finding is that a lot of the information on the internet regarding DMR network is not necessarily correct. And you find that you set a radio up for one network only to find they've moved to the other network. So we've got a bit more work to do on that, Chris. But when I was up on Monday...
I actually find it quite interesting. It's not something, as you know, DMR is not something I know an awful lot about. But one thing I was playing with actually a little while ago, something else I've been doing, is playing with my SDR Play RSP1 with the SDR inner software and plugging that into some software called DSD Plus, which decodes DMR signals, and you can. But what's quite nice is you can hear the person's voice, but you can also see on the screen what's going on. If you've got a DMR handheld, you don't get information. It only works, or the one I've got anyway, the Motorola one that I've got. It has to be pre-programmed with the code, the appropriate talk group and color code and slot and all that sort of thing. But you don't, as the user, because that's designed mainly for the PMR world, for people that don't really care about any of that things. You're a security guard or a taxi driver, you don't care about all that. All you do is, does the thing work? as obviously we do care. So what's quite nice is this software shows you all that information. You can see when a signal's coming in, you can see which talk group it's on, which slot it's on, that sort of thing, and what the user's ID is. So actually, you get a lot more information. It's quite interesting to go and learn how things work by seeing, even though you can't talk back because it's a receiver only. It's actually quite easy to see, to sort of learn how the system works by seeing that information on the screen. So I found that quite interesting, actually.
Yeah, that sounds good, and that's something I'm going to play with as well. I did manage, though, Monday night to test my co-plug on four repeaters around the south of England under DMR. So I think, well, I'm pretty close to getting it right. Now, Dan, I don't want you to commercial this, but I know you've been writing for a company on DMR.
Yep.
Is it as difficult as I'm finding? And which network are you on? Are you on Phoenix or Braemeyers?
Well, I was going to ask you the same question. So we're on Brandmeister here.
Brandmeisters.
And yeah, about it being difficult. One thing I found is that each radio is different. Like for example, some radios, the digital contacts and talk groups aren't separate. They're just digital contacts. But on the particular brand of radio I'm using, they are different. So that's kind of a screwy thing. The other screwy thing about it is on my particular radio, once you've programmed the channel, you have to program it into a zone. Otherwise, the radio won't show it as being programmed. And that was a hang up for me recently. So all this stuff is, you just got to learn about it for the radio you're using, because a lot of it is radio specific. If I had a Motorola, it would be somewhat different anyway than the one I got, right?
Yeah. Well, I think the problem I've had, Dan, is that the Phoenix network uses static talk groups, and the Brandmeisters uses dynamic for some of them. And the problem I've had is I don't have any Brandmeister repeaters within range of my QTH. So unless I set up a hotspot, I'm a little bit stuck and I can't test and play. But hey, that's another story. That's probably an ongoing story, and I shouldn't complain about it. So, sounds like we've all been very busy. We've gone quite long, so I'm going to close it up here. I'm going to say 73s to the guys. That doesn't mean that the podcast is finished. It just means I'm saying good night to the guys who've recorded the news with me. I'd like to thank Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU. Thanks for joining us.
7-3, Martin, and congrats again on number 300.
Thanks, Dan. I'd also like to thank Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH.
Yes, thank you, Martin. It's been another fun episode, and absolutely congratulations on the episode 300. And here's the next 300. Believe it, imagine that when we get to that milestone.
Yeah, well, I'll be in my 70s if we get to 300.
I'm sure we'll still be here, Martin.
Hope so. And Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH. Thanks for joining us, Frank.
Thanks for having me. And again, 11 years, 300 episodes. I feel a video promotion coming on.
I feel a lot of things coming on, Frank. But yeah, so thanks very much, guys. And let's hope we do get another 300 in the bag, just for the sheer hell of it. And I think the listeners enjoyed anyway. So 73 all.
7-3.
Cheers, guys. 7-3.
The guys were able to complete 300 episodes of the ICQ podcast thanks to our donors, just like you. If you're one of our past and present donors, thank you. If you haven't donated yet, please consider supporting us and head over to icqpodcast.com/donate and help out the show. That link again is icqpodcast.com/donate. And thank you very much for all your support over the last 300 episodes.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Much appreciated for passing it over to me. The ICQ podcast, 300 episodes. Well, I would not have believed it. If somebody told this to me at the beginning, can you do a few podcasts for us? Yeah, I did. 300 later. But anyway, I'd like to say wholehearted congratulations to all the team. Well done. Keep up the good work. Keep encouraging people that
get involved in the hobby and do good work, and that's the way to go. Congratulations to everyone. Thank you very much. It's been great.
Now it's time to have a look at the Newseum Briefing with me, Colin M6BOY. We start off the section here with a call, I suppose, for all amateurs to look out for a fellow. Lee Edwards has gone missing. He's in the States, possibly in the California, Grand Canyon, Roswell, Denver, Colorado type of area. He's 30 years old, just over 30 years old, white male, 5'10", weighs 155 pounds, last seen in Sparks, Nevada. So there's this Facebook group looking out for Lee. Probably something that's making something that's visible for ourselves is that his number plate on his car is Kilo Echo 7 Kilo Papa Yankee. So of course, shout out for this appeal to find him. His wife Michelle obviously very worried and desperately trying to look out for him. So say if you see the plate with his call sign Kilo Echo 7 Kilo Papa Yankee on a 2008 Ford Focus, so there's a Facebook group entitled Missing Lee Edwards. So Missing Lee Edwards on Facebook. If you come across Lee, and certainly help his family out to find him from there. International Lighthouse and Lightship Festival starts in just over a couple of weeks' time. 335 stations will be active, and leading the field is Germany with 53 entries, the USA 48, Australia 39, and the UK or England with 24. 17 countries are being involved with just a single entry. But as I say, lots of stations with up to 335 working there for you to take advantage of. A recent station to come on board is GB2 Lima Golf. This is the Mole of Galloway. It's being brought on the air by the Wigtownshire Amateur Radio Club, and it's participating from the Northern Lighthouse, which got that award 26 years ago when taking part in the Lightship weekend. So fingers crossed they have a great opportunity there. More information about this special event, go to ILLW.net for more information from there. As we announced in the last episode there, Homebrew Heroes Award has been launched by Frank Howell, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel. But along with that, the ICQ podcast is obviously his media sponsors, and proud to be involved with Frank there. Good news that another commercial sponsor has come on board as a prize sponsor. Siglent has joined in, and the Jason Jonko, the marketing manager, has announced their participation by saying the amateur radio and maker communities have embraced Siglent since they launched their North American office 5 years ago, and they're proud to work together with customers to develop implementation that delivers on the high performance measurements at pricing the reach of a broad range of people. And so they're delighted to be involved as a sponsor. They'll be donating a SDS 1202XE oscilloscope, one of the most valuable products, to the annual recipient of the award. So congratulations there to Frank for continuing to extend out this award there. Certainly I know the judging panel will have a massive job trying to choose their recipient of this award. And as I say, the work Martin and myself and the rest of the ICQ team are doing to help and promote this award is obviously of a great benefit, not only to the hobby, but also hopefully to this wonderful new initiative. So as I say, we'll keep you updated as things go along. Of course, if you want to find out more information about this award scheme, all you need to do is go along to homebrewheroes.org, where you'll be able to find out more information from there. Right guys, well, it's time to head over to our feature this episode, which is our discussion about AMSAT USA with Keith Baker, Kilo Bravo 1 Sierra Foxtrot. Hope you enjoy.
Hi guys, first of all my apologies that I couldn't be on the show live. Selfishly, at the time the show's actually being recorded, I'll be sunning myself on the Greek island of Santorini, although by the time it goes out I will be back in the UK, just hopefully there's still some sunshine left. Now it doesn't seem long ago that having just moved into this house, I was recording a message for the 200th episode. And at the time, I don't even think I'd built my studio, so I think I had everything pretty much precariously balanced on the edge of my dining room table. And I remember commenting at the time how surprised we all were when we got to episode 200. And I think I said something along the lines of, here's to the next 200. Well, we're halfway there. Did I think we'd make it? Who knows? Now, for whatever reason, many podcasts and shows come and go. Why is this one still going strong after 300 episodes? Well, without a doubt, that's got to be the team behind it. Some shows, be they podcasts, radio shows, TV programmes, the people present it because they have to, either for their career or sadly just for their egos. But listeners aren't silly, and you can tell when there's no real passion behind it. With ICQ, I can say firsthand that each and every presenter has a passion for radio and for this show, and all they want to do is share their message with the world. And to me, that's why this show is still going strong after all this time. With that in mind, I say thank you so much to the rest of the team for 300 awesome episodes. Thank you to our listeners for continuing to download and support the show. And assuming that I'll probably double book myself again, I look forward to recording a message for the next milestone.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Well, guys, for the 300th episode, I'm pleased to announce we managed to get hold of AMSAT US. And not just any AMSAT US, we got Keith Baker, KB1SF, or VA3KSF. You use both call signs because you live right on the border, I believe, Keith.
Absolutely, that's exactly right, Martin. Yeah, I live right on the U.S.-Canadian border here, just northeast of Detroit, just south of our big Great Lake, Lake Huron. And there's a river that runs between Lake Huron and Lake Erie down through Detroit, and it forms the border up here. So as I was saying, sometimes I'll start a conversation on using my U.S. call, and I have to finish it with my Canadian call because I go right across the U.S.-Canadian border sometimes when I'm chatting, even on 2 meters or 70 centimeters here. So interesting setup. I'm also a examiner for both the U.S. and Canada, and that's kind of an interesting thing because I have to remember when I'm giving in the exam which country I'm in. But but other than that, and that's one of my other things that I like to do for amateur radio besides working for AMSAT. I'm a former president of AMSAT. I've sat on the board for the AMSAT North America group. Very familiar with the AMSAT UK group. We've done a lot of work. I did a lot of work when we were building our big Oscar 40 satellite back in the 90s, where it was a lot of work back and forth between AMSAT UK and AMSAT North America, and also AMSAT Germany. That was a very large international project. We had something like 14 different countries building that satellite. So spent a lot of time in England, spent a lot of time in Germany, spent a lot of time building the satellite or overseeing the building. I wasn't actually doing a lot of the building work down in Florida at our installation down there.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. And I'm going to just pull you back just a second on before we go off on the more technical stuff. The joke was, and please take this in the way it's intended, my son Colin, who's also on the podcast, M6BOY, was a very naughty boy at Dayton because a lot of people kept saying to him, "You have a strange accent, where are you from?" And he would look people in the face and say, "I'm from Detroit." And they go, "Oh, right." So sorry about that.
No, that's fine. We all have different accents depending on which part of the country we're from. I grew up in New England. I first grew up in New England, but I lost most of my New England accent because I spent 20 years in the U.S. Air Force, and you tend to lose that. And also, I spent some time in broadcasting, and of course, when you're doing that, you tend to lose whatever accent you may have picked up at that time.
Right. Well, Keith, before we hit the big one, which is AMSAT, I also know that you do a hell of a lot of other operating. I checked out your QRZ page and saw that you're also a big HF person.
Very much so. DX HF was always my first love. And I think that's the nice part about this avocation we call amateur radio, is that it's really several different hobbies and avocations rolled into one. In that, you can start out collecting states if you want to, or working continents, or seeing how many DX countries you can work, or I guess now they call them entities. I know the RSGB has this IOTA program where you're collecting islands around the world. But there's so many different pieces to this that it's really several different hobbies rolled into one. And if you get tired of one thing, you can always do something else. And I guess my HF work kind of led me into saying, well, this is kind of fun and I really enjoy it. And it's a lot of things to do, but I'd like to try something different. And my different at that point was just about the time I was ready to retire from the Air Force back in the early 1990s, was to get into satellite work. And I'd always been fascinated by space and those sorts of things. And I ended up starting to work some of the radio, the RS satellites back then, which had a 2-meter up, 10-meter down transponder on them. And so that became my other thing. But there's always a first. All of us, I think, have a first love in amateur radio, and then I've branched out. And as I said, I do a lot of work with teaching. I've done some teaching work. I've also, as I said, I'm an examiner in both the United States and Canada, and that's another aspect of the hobby. And there's people that really get into one or the other of these things, and then they say, "Gee, this is really great, but I'm going to try something different." And we're seeing that right now with the upper satellite, the upper HF bands are kind of dead. We're seeing a lot of folks starting to say, well, gee, I want to do something different. And the something different that some people are doing is getting into satellite work. So, yes, I do a lot and I enjoy all different aspects of the hobby.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you said that you got into satellites, but you didn't just get into satellites because at one point in time you became the chairman of AMSAT US, and I believe you're still the treasurer, so you're still on the board driving AMSAT forward, aren't you?
Well, that's true, and that's another aspect of a lot of the organizations that are associated with amateur radio, AMSAT being one of them. Very soon after I retired from the Air Force, I was, sort of looking around for something to do and to use some of the skills that I'd picked up in my Air Force work, which was predominantly in the financial aspect of things. And so I remember we were just about at that point, AMSAT was just about starting to work on Phase 3D, which later became Oscar 40. And I said, gee, I did some project management for the Air Force for many years. I wonder if I could use, volunteer those skills. Well, I soon learned that AMSAT North America is what we call an equal opportunity exploiter. I soon found myself very much involved in that project, and then I became involved in the board of directors and eventually became the executive vice president and the president. And then I said, after a while, it's time for some newer blood to come into the organization, as most volunteer organizations are like that. I've always believed that you rise from the ranks and you take a turn in the leadership of the organization, but then you kind of step aside and let somebody else do it, which builds some depth into the organization rather than just having the same people doing the same things over and over again. So I took a step back around the 2000 time frame and eventually ended up coming back in about 10 years later as the treasurer. So I've drifted in and out of the organization, and right now I'm finding that I'm spending a lot of my time being more or less of a consultant to talk to the local or to the current leadership of the organization as an advisor, and saying, yeah, well, we tried that 10 years ago and it didn't work out. Or, hey, here's a thought of something that we did back then that really worked out well. Maybe we can modify it and do some other things. So, yeah, I've been in and out of the whole thing for many, many years.
So you've been a very busy boy, and that's very, very interesting. But from the technical side, we're now at 50 years of amateur radio in space. We've had some great history of the various satellites going up there, being put up by amateurs. There are easy satellites, aren't there? There are not so easy ones to work. And now we've got a geostationary one, which unfortunately doesn't cover your part of the world. Looking forward, what's likely to happen?
Well, the big issue always is launches. We've, in some ways, Martin, we've become victims of our own success in that AMSAT in years past has been a pioneer in many ways in working with launch agencies and working with space agencies to develop new technologies for launches. We've done, for example, AMSAT was one of the first, and I say AMSAT now, I'm talking about AMSAT and our partners, which included some of the work that went on your side of the pond over in England with AMSAT UK. We developed the first CMOS devices to fly in space. We've developed, in partnership with Ariane, which is the European Space Agency, we've developed some new ways of launching satellites. Oscar 1, a lot of people don't realize that Oscar 1, the very first Oscar satellite, orbital satellite carrying amateur radio, the very first Oscar satellite was the very first satellite to ever be carried as a secondary launcher, as a secondary payload. The Oscar 7 satellite that we have found came back to life after dying back in the 80s, popped back on in 1970 or 1996. In fact, it was one of your countrymen, Pat Gowan, who was tuning around on the satellite band and started hearing a beacon and said, well, gee, that sounds like a satellite. And sure enough, it was Oscar 7 that had come back to life. And now it is the longest living satellite that's still operating ever. That's not just amateur, that's ever. So we've done an awful lot of things that a lot of people now take for granted in the space world, in the space business. But we've become, as I said, victims of our own success. And what's happened is that the cost of launching satellites has really, really, really gone right through the roof. Now, we've somewhat countered that by downsizing them into what's now the CubeSat standard. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but again, that whole thing was designed by a former or a current AMSAT member, one of our members who's a professor now at Morehead State University. His name's Bob Twiggs. Bob has been very active with some of our AMSAT projects over the years, but he came up, he and another gentleman out at Cal Poly, or no, I think it was at Stanford. He was on the faculty at Stanford University in California, developed this CubeSat standard. Well, this standard has gone worldwide. I mean, there's hundreds of these things now being launched. What we're trying to do is to get something into a higher orbit. It would be nice to have a geostationary satellite, but unfortunately, in order to get worldwide coverage out of a geostationary satellite, you have to have three of them. You've got one that's now over Africa that's been put up there by another. You know, you're riding it. It's riding as a piggyback, if you will, on a geostationary satellite that was launched for other purposes. I believe it's a television satellite. But those kinds of opportunities don't come along very quickly, and there has to be some connection with a launch agency or a satellite builder in order to have that happen. So, but the cost of actually putting a transponder on a geostationary satellite is just literally astronomical. We're talking tens of millions of dollars. And for an organization like AMSAT, which is a nonprofit organization, even combining our activities with other countries, there's still not enough revenue there, resources to actually build something like that. So that's our big challenge. And what we're trying to do is look for opportunities to build transponders that will go into a higher orbit, very much like what Oscar 40 was, and before that Oscar 13 and Oscar 10, that were in very high elliptical orbits that would give us a lot of talk time, if you will, while the satellite was up, rather than these low Earth satellites that maybe have a pastime of 15 or 20 minutes.
Yeah, let's say that's interesting. It amazes me, these CubeSats. They're what, 4 inches square, or is it 10 centimeters cubed?
They're about 3.5 inches on a side.
Yeah, I mean that's
like
phenomenally small. And then you point your handy Yagi at it and receive it or transmit through it, and you're thinking, it's tracking it, and the thing is so small and so far away. and yet we can communicate through it. And when you tell the general public, they look at you so you're a blithering idiot. No way are you going to ever talk to that or something that size in space. But
well, it's part of that is the technology that's in all of our cell phones. I mean, you stop and think of what you've got in your pocket with a cell phone. There's more computing power in that cell phone that was once in our space shuttles when they were first launched. So everything has been shrunk down, and it's all of this surface mount technology that allows us to do that. And the way we build our CubeSats, and that's another thing that we've been very successful at doing, is if you look at a CubeSat, the way it's built, there's boards that are stacked one on top of another. One board is for the transmitter, one board is for the receiver, one board is for the computer, one board is for the batteries. And then there's usually one or two or three that are left. We call those TSFR, this space for rent. And at least on this side of the pond, what we've been able to do is we've been able to partner with universities and fly experiments on our satellites that do something to advance the state of the radio art. And that's the key, is that the experiments that a university wants to do has to relate in some way with the way we're advancing the state of the art in radio. For example, one of our university experiments that we're flying right now on Oscar 92 and Oscar 91, what we're doing there is they're checking out the suitability of off-the-shelf electronic components and see what happens when you put them in the harsh environment of space, either the cooling and the heating as well as the cosmic rays and all of that. And in turn, what we've been able to do is with NASA, our National Aerospace Organization here, they have a program called ILLANA, which is the educational launch of nanosatellites. And because we're carrying a scientific experiment from a university, we then get a no-cost launch. And so we've been able to garner that whole project to put our amateur radio transponders on these CubeSats. But at the same time, we're using, or they're using our platforms, if you will, to do their scientific experiments that relate in some way to amateur radio. And we have to remember that we are amateur radio and in terms of nonprofit and all of that. So, but that's one way we've been doing it, and we're continuing to do that. And I know AMSAT UK is doing the same thing to try and garner launches based on assisting other organizations with what they want to do. And then our goal there becomes putting an amateur transponder in every satellite, every CubeSat that goes. It would be really great. We're right now in the process of looking around for other partners here in North America to do the same thing.
Yeah, and that's a brilliant thing, and something I wasn't aware of. But if you think about it, our hobby is about one of the terminologies in the UK licensing is you get an amateur radio license for self-learning of radio technology. Now, if you're then mixing that with experiments, which we are experimenting all the time with our radio, and if you take the terminology that they use in Ireland, they don't have radio amateurs out there, they have radio experimenters. So yeah, it's kind of experimenting and taking projects, like you say, from the university and flying them on one of our satellites and working with them would give us far more knowledge of what's going on, in the world, but equally we've got data and other things to receive and practice our skills, haven't we?
That's true. And there's a whole group. I was talking earlier about different aspects of the hobby. There's another subgroup within the amateur satellite hobby of people that are doing nothing but gathering telemetry from satellites. And in fact, the UK's CubeSat was designed specifically for being young school children to be able to capture the technology, or to capture the telemetry rather, and analyze that as part of a learning process. The other aspect of this is that, and we on this side of the pond have more or less the same goals, if you will, of trying to advance the state of the art and to push the state of the art of the radio art. But the other thing is that when it comes time, when these big organizational meetings where they start carving up the spectrum, one of the things that is often held up as justification for continued access to our frequencies is the work that organizations like AMSAT are doing to use the spectrum that we've been given for experimentation. I like to think in many ways we're playing in the sandbox of the radio spectrum to try and come up with new and different ways of communicating. All of the protocols that are on the internet, a lot of the protocols that are in our cell phones, first had their birth, if you will, in the amateur radio bands. And so AMSAT and organizations like ours are really kind of out there on the forefront and helping to justify our continued access to frequencies, not just the frequencies that we use, but even if you aren't interested in satellite work, if you're using HF or you're using VHF or you're using very low frequencies or you're on 160 meters or even if you're up in the gigahertz range, we don't do anything unless we have access to spectrum. And keeping that spectrum in the amateur radio orbit is important, and one of the ways that we justify our existence, if you will, and our continued access to that spectrum is to continue to advance the state of the art. And that's kind of one of the other things that AMSAT does, more or less as a side issue. But yeah, we build satellites, but we're also helping to push the state of the art.
Yeah. Well, not everybody in AMSAT builds satellites, as I well know, and if somebody wants to get involved and wants to find out more about this, there's a two-sided. Some build satellites, some write software. Other people, like myself, just make the odd contact through a satellite and get very excited about it. But the best way to find out, I suppose, more about this would be your AMSAT website. For the US, that would be www.amsat.org. Would you agree there, Keith?
Absolutely. And we're always looking for people that have a skill that they would like to donate to us. As I said, we call ourselves equal opportunity exploiters. And our paycheck is a stroked ego sometimes because you say, hey, there's something that I've really done. But there's all kinds of activities and all kinds of effort that really needs to happen. And it doesn't happen because it doesn't happen without volunteers. AMSAT North America has one full-time paid employee. That's our office manager that's in an office in the D.C. area. All the rest of us, from the president right on down to the people that are writing the software and building the satellites, we're all volunteers. So if somebody has a skill that they think that they could use, and that doesn't necessarily have to involve building satellites. We can always use folks that have web skills that can help write web pages. If you have some skills in fundraising, we can always use assistance in that department too. So again, yeah, you have some of us are just interested in operating satellites and saying, gee, that's really neat. I tell you, because we're using a system whereby there's you actually hear yourself. You're hearing a full duplex. You're hearing your own signal come back down from the satellite. I tell you, the first time you hear that really, really changes your life.
Yeah. I find it strange, and most people say, "Do I really sound like that?" And you go, "Yeah,
yeah."
I think one of the strangest things I had to get through was not only do I really sound like this, but when I actually edit. When you edit yourself, God, that screws with your mind for a little while.
Yes.
Until you get used to it.
Yeah. I in broadcasting, I've spent several years in broadcasting, and but what was even more fun was I would go out on a remote broadcast someplace and someone would walk up to me and say, "You don't look anything like you sound." which, when you think about it, is an absolutely silly statement because you just don't know.
Well,
It's
I can understand your statement like that, because I always joke and say, "Hey, I got a face for radio." So
yeah. We don't sound the same through a microphone as we do when we're talking to talking normally, because we don't have the head is resonating and the whole part of our mouth is resonating, but we do sound very different to someone else than we do to ourselves.
yeah, we certainly do. Well, we've had a great chat. Keith, anything else you'd like to tell us? Any events you've got planned for this year, or going forward?
Well, I know AMSAT UK has a colloquium every year. I'm not sure exactly when that happens, but that's a gathering of amateur satellite operators in your part of the world. We have our symposium coming up near Washington, D.C. this year. That'll be in October. So if you're interested in satellites, and we always have a booth set up at the big amateur radio conventions here in the States as well, and I know they do the same thing with the rallies over there. So if you're interested in satellite work and you want to get started, and there's plenty of people out there. In fact, we started a whole new program over here called Ambassadors, where it's kind of an Elmering process for folks who have volunteered their time to help people get started. Because, it's not really that difficult once you get used to it. I write a column for the Canadian Amateur, which is the large amateur radio magazine here in Canada. I also write a satellite column for the Spectrum Monitor, which is a predominantly shortwave listener program or publication. Here in the States, it's an online e-zine. And then, of course, I also write for our journal. But there's a lot of information out there on getting started. We have a book called Getting Started on the Amateur Satellites that's available. So there's, a lot of people say, well, it's too complicated and I can't do it and it costs too much money. And I say, no, that's not true. It's just like any other aspect of the hobby. You can throw a wire over a tree and run a dipole, or you can have a great big tower and a beam and do you can make your satellite station look like a tracking station, or you can go out with a handheld antenna and it's as complicated as you want to make it. So, and I'd like to thank you for the work that you do, and each of us is providing an opportunity for people to get interested or to stay interested in amateur radio. And a lot of the publications and a lot of the work that's being done with podcasts and broadcasts and so forth, and using all the different mediums that we have, is helping to grow the hobby. And I think that's fantastic. So I salute you and I thank you for the work that you're doing to bring amateur radio to the masses.
Well, thank you very much for your compliment, Keith, and that was totally unexpected, but thank you. Well, as I say, it's a great hobby. Keith, as I close up, if somebody wanted to contact you, do you make yourself available via email, or is it through the AMSAT website?
Well, they can go to my QRZ page. There's a link there to my webpage, and there's links there with emails and telephones and all of that. So if they want to talk to me, I'd be very happy to help them out. And I do that. A lot of people will just drop a note and say, "Hey, I'm just getting started. What do I do? What do I need to do? Who do I talk to?" More than happy to do that. That's just another piece of the hobby to help other people along. I don't know if you have the same activity over there. We call them Elmers here on this side of the pond. I don't know if it's mentoring. And that was one of the things that my Elmer told me when I was getting my first license was pay it forward. Help somebody else to get in. And I'm happy to do that.
Oh, that's great. We don't have the word, well, we do know about the word Elmer. It's not used particularly in the UK. But I always say to the guys at our club, everybody brings something to the table. Doesn't matter what license level you are, or even if you're just day one trying to get into the hobby. Treat everybody the same. let them ask the questions, because if they want to know, that's the good thing. And often I've seen somebody new in the hobby has asked a question that stimulated an hour or more discussion by the guys.
Yep.
So that's good.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I say to my people, they say there's no stupid questions. The only stupid question that is the one that you don't ask. So,
yeah, correct. Well, I'd like to thank you, Keith, for your time tonight, and wish you every success going forward in amateur radio. And I'm sure we'll do this again at some point in the future. So thank you very much for your time tonight, Keith. And,
absolutely my pleasure, Martin.
No problems at all.
Hi, Mrs. B here. The guys thank you very much for your downloads. However, there are a few things that would help the ICQ podcast to continue to grow. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We need you, and it's free. 73's Mrs. B.
Hello, it's Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf here, ICQ podcast listener since 2012 and presenter for roughly half that time. So we've made it to episode 300. That's not a bad innings for something that at the beginning was designed to last perhaps for just 10 episodes. So very many congratulations to Martin and Colin, and here's to the next 300. I hope you've all enjoyed listening to the podcast as much as I have. And kudos to Martin, who still somehow manages to come up with original ideas for features each and every episode. A special mention also to all the presenters who've been involved, past and present. And once again, very many congratulations to Colin and Martin. 7-3.
300 episodes. That's 290 more than Martin originally planned. Congratulations to the show for making this amazing accomplishment. Happy 300 episodes from Bill at the ICQ podcast.
ICQ. Do you?
Well, guys, welcome back now for the end of the show wrap-up. Hope you enjoyed Martin's interview there with Keith Baker, Kilo Bravo 1, Sierra Foxtrot there, discussing his role in amateur radio and also with AMSAT in the US. We've been certainly looking forward to interviewing AMSAT for some time, and are really grateful that, as I say, Keith came on board and helped us out there with that interview there. Right now, delving into our mailbag this episode, we've got a few bits here we've gathered up over the last couple of weeks, and we start with a message from Adrian, M0 Golf Lima Juliet, long-time listener to the show. Pops us a mail, and he's looking for information in relation to radio operations and radioactivity going on in Lanzarote. He'll be on the island from the 1st September to the 11th September. So if anyone has any information in relation to bans, access, information, etc., while operating on Lanzarote, if you can let us know, and we'll certainly pass on the information to Adrian for you and for him, so he can enjoy his trip there to the island. I know when I was there about 2-3 years ago, I did have a listen out, Adrian. Didn't seem to be much going on around the Playa del Carmen area. But as I say, I really was only listening and wasn't for large periods of time. So maybe I was at the wrong periods of time when I was listening out. Okay, so next bit of feedback now. Martin Peel, Golf for Mike Quebec Bravo, says he's enjoying the shows, and the longer the better on the shows. Well, we've always said, Martin, we're not controlled by space. So obviously, we produce shows we hope are entertaining along the way. When discussing the option of an exam-only route to licensing, I haven't heard you mention those who are excluded from getting a license under the current system, because courses are held very infrequently in the area, perhaps only once or twice a year, and these dates then clash with other commitments. Martin's daughter would like to get her license while she was at school 6 days a week. It wasn't feasible, and likewise now she's at university. Current system is great for those who can attend, but why not have exam-only too, and that could include testing. They know what QSY means. Also, if it's multiple choice, give an option of taking it through Pearson VUE exam centres or similar assessment centres on demand. By the way, it'd be great to work you HF when you're on the Belfast. Do you post anywhere when you're on the air and what frequencies you are on? Okay, so Belfast, drop us a line and Martin will get back to you when the guys are going to be there. So do that via the website and we'll come back to you and let you know next time the guys are there. Now, exams, this is quite an interesting one, isn't it, Dad? What do we do about this? Because we've obviously got our system here in the UK, which does involve giving up a few weekends along the way. The Americans have the multiple choice question thing where you can pretty much learn throughout the course of the year and tip up at, say, the Handfest and sit down and do all your courses. I suppose what's right, what's wrong, or is the bigger problem here is that we've got so few people going through the system in the UK that it's quite hard to cater a solution maybe fit everybody's needs.
I think the problem is, Colin. Yes, I can see where Martin's coming from about lack of courses and one thing and another. The problem you've got, Martin, is when I did mine 20 plus years ago, about 20 years ago, and even then the guy was pretty much doing it for free, but I actually went to a college, did an evening class, and the guy got paid for doing the course, and it ran over 3 terms, so it was pretty much the whole year. Though I passed my exam in the middle of the course, but the course ran the whole year, and it was quite a big commitment. A couple of evenings a week, reasonable commitment. Today, in the UK, most of the exam centres are set up by people like ourselves. I'm a member of the Sutton and Sheen Club. We set up an exam centre in a scout hall. We set up you have to register the room as a training room, and the instructors don't get paid. They do the course for free, effectively. We charge a nominal fee, about £10 a day, but for that we pay the scouts that money. We don't take it, and the scouts give you tea, coffee, and biscuits. And in fairness, if you've got 3 people, that's nothing, because most halls in the London area, and probably the rest of the country, want £30 an hour to hire it. So 8 hours, you're looking at, 3x 24, 240 quid. That's before you even start. 3 days, it gets very expensive unless you're running massive people. So the thing is, we're all doing it cost effective for our students, but unfortunately sometimes you just can't get the venue time. So yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I still think the 3-tier license system is good, even though I never went that route. I went straight to the full license when you could do that in the UK, but I don't think it was the best thing to do. So Colin, long answer, but these new systems that people are coming out with, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't.
I think the thing is, it goes back to the same thing, doesn't it? Somehow we've got to increase the number of people in the hobby so we can try different things on getting people licensed. But at the same time, nothing's going to be effective to do that until we get the numbers up in the first place. And no one's going to necessarily be able to say, oh, we could do it this way or that way until those numbers go up. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, isn't it? In how it works there. I don't know, maybe now, in fact, Dalston University, maybe in a more populated area, maybe there might be an opportunity for us to come on board and go that way. So who knows? I tell you what, Dad, I'm going to send you on Martin's email, and maybe you can give him a shout on when you're next on the Belfast, and he can listen out to you on HF, and get your daughter there at the rig as well, and get her enjoying, say, being part of that experience too. Okay, Chris, no call sign here for you, Chris. I think you're coming in new to the hobby. He says, just discovered the podcast. He's loving catching up on them. Oh, God, 300 episodes, Chris. I do apologise for the damage to your eardrums. Just so you know, Martin and I have got no assets. You can't sue us for anything. So anyway, he says, interesting getting into the hobby, specifically Manpack ex-Army Klansman radios. Thick squaddy, so stick to what he knows. Just wondering if you've done a segment on them and how fair against modern civilian radios, and if they're a viable system for the hobby, etc. He's tried the search function, Val, so we need to put him in the right direction. So we're going to give you some suggestions in a second. Also, I hold a full GMDSS certificate. Would I still need to go through the normal testing and licensing process? He's tried Google with no luck. So great, we've got a trainer on board here, Chris, so we'll get that answered for you. Thanks everyone involved, and hope the project continues well into the future. Chris, you might have heard us mention we only ever signed up to 10 episodes. Right, okay, a couple of things to point you to. ICQ Podcast Series 2 Episode 17, which is, if I remember rightly on that maths, is about Episode 30. Released in August 2009. We did a segment on buying military radio. Also check out as well, around about October last year, we've got a YouTube video of our discussions with the guys from the Vintage and Military Amateur Radio Society. So those guys might be very good people to have a chat to as well for you. So as I say, I think Stuart was the guy we spoke to, and Bronick is the editor of their publication. So definitely people we point you in the direction of there. But what you call it? Chris makes mention here to a GMDSS certificate, Dad, but that doesn't preclude him from having to do his foundation, intermediate, etc. exam, does it?
No, I think you're going to have to talk to Ofcom because I've never come across this certificate. So, sorry, Chris. You're going to have to talk to Ofcom and see what they will do for you. Yeah, the Vintage Wireless Military Wireless Group are very good. VMARS. Have a look at the VMARS website. But what you do have to remember is that a lot of these Klansman radios, the military only ever used upper sideband. So, whereas we operate lower sideband below 10 megs, so if you were down on 40 meters or 80 meters, you'd be on the wrong sideband, so you would have trouble making contacts with lots of people. They are very robust. There is some good stuff, but they are not going to have all the bells and whistles that a lot of a lot of amateur stuff has. The other slight disadvantage, but if you've gone the military route, is most of the military radios are 24 volt instead of 13.8. So you'll have to have a 24 volt power supply. And certainly there are some radios up around the 6 meters and 4 meter areas. But I believe the way the channel spacing works on the military radio, you get one in about 4 of our frequencies just because of the step that they're set for. So if you're going into military radio, please do so and enjoy it, but go in with your eyes open because you may not be talking to as many people as you'd like to. Is that fair, Colin?
Yep, certainly very fair. I mean, my thought would be the fact it doesn't preclude you having some military radio, but you might end up with something a bit more commercial as well to make more contacts on. But certainly VMARS is well worth checking out. Stuart and Bronick be worthwhile checking out. As I say, around October last year, we've got a YouTube video where we interviewed the guys there about what they do at the VMARS Club. So there's certainly people who'd be worthwhile talking to. I'm fairly convinced you'll have to do the licensing step. They're looking at that there, but as I say, Ofcom might have a way of transferring that across into an amateur license. But as I say, as most of these things, what you hear about people who are, ex-Navy, ex-Army, etc., who are really good on their radios, I'm sure it wouldn't take too long to work your way through the bands of the licensing. If you need to, but see what Ofcom say. Okay, Mark Twington, Mike Zero Hotel Tango Yankee, another guy just found our podcast. Fantastic, thank you. Starting with episode 298. Good listen, thanks. But I had to smile when early on you highlight the lack of females entering the RSGB examinations, roughly around 9%, and then one of the presenters who went to Cyprus on holiday, unfortunately that was you, Dad, talks about going to a junk sale and barbecue day and the men enjoying talking about radio while the wives have a natter. It's a social hobby for the wives. Talk about stereotyping. He says he teaches physics at secondary level and they're doing all they can to address the gender imbalance and taking up the sciences at A level. Come on, folks, don't let everyday language your podcast reinforce the perception that amateur radio is for men. I still think it's a great podcast, though, despite the criticism. 73 to Mark. Mark, I'm going to jump in and just protect save Dad here a little bit. I think we've got a catch-22 on the show. And what I mean by that is the fact is that you won't hear any of us say anything negative about ladies, females, people of gender joining the hobby other than men. And I think that I could speak probably across the board of all the presenters when I say that. The catch-22 is do we report exactly what we see when we're doing our features? And when you take the Cypriots group, and I've been lucky enough many years ago to be asked to join them for a period of time, that is exactly what it is. So I suppose it's a catch-22. I mean, you probably reported on it correctly, Dad, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily preclude them from the hobby because they're around the hobby. But as I say, it is what you saw. I'm sure that would have been what you saw because that's certainly what I saw there, as I say, when I was on Cyprus 5-6 years ago. It is probably a true report, but as I say, I think we all do our bit to get more ladies and people of gender transition into the hobby, don't we?
We certainly do. And in fairness, it was not meant to be a sexist thing. It's what happens in Cyprus. The guys, I mean, I did a talk for them when I was out there. And the guys went and had a meeting upstairs. It was the club meeting, the radio club meeting. Downstairs in the bar, a number of the wives had turned up. And they have a meal and they have a chat about what they've been doing. And at the end of the radio club evening, everybody meets up and everybody's very social. The ladies know about radio, but then those particular ladies are not particularly interested in radio. It's a fair assumption. I've met some great ladies in this hobby. And, I mean, the classic is the British Young Ladies Amateur Radio Group by Laura's. Absolutely lovely ladies. And, you know, hopefully we'll be with them again this year up in Newark. So, Mark, okay, I apologise if I've offended you, but in fairness, it was what happens out in Cyprus. So, you know, we shouldn't exclude young girls, and I'm more than happy to work with them either way. I've trained young ladies as a tutor. They get treated exactly the same in my book. So
yeah, I you know what though, in some respect, and this is what I would say about the Cypriot ones, is that at least the wife go to the meeting, and I've been to other meetings, other clubs, etc., where there's no sign of a non-male in the vicinity, or the only one you might see if it's taking place in a bar or a social club, whatever it be. You know what I mean? And there'd be a non-male, should we say, behind the bar. Let's all be inclusive. A non-male behind the bar serving drinks, whatever it be, as part of the social club. And then the rest of the room's full of amateur radio men. So the fact that the ladies go to the meeting, at least, and they're engaged with their partners, etc., and part of the wider community. I'd also say as well, Mark, as well, maybe the other thing to take into account with that group as well is they're generally expat. They're expats and they're semi-retired and whatever, and it's maybe a different collection rather than anything else. So, yeah, as I say, Mark, I mean, it's, again, you know, I know tone is important, etc. But as I say, yeah, I'm not quite sure where you're based, Mark. But you know, if you're looking for anyone in the South London area to train some of your students and get them their amateur radio license, I'm sure Martin and his group would be more than happy to help you out. As I say, in helping them get on their ticket for them from there. So give us a shout and let us know if that might help you out. But I'm not too sure where quite you're located at the moment, Mark, as we record this. Right, well, it's great to get so much feedback. Really do appreciate it. So we're going to do some just wrapping up here now. So we'd like to thank the guys who took part in the News Roundtable in this episode. That was Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Dan, KB6 November Uniform, and also Frank Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel. Also like to thank our colleagues as well who have done little snippets for us to drop into the show to mark our 300th episode. Thank you very much, guys, for getting involved from there. We'd like to thank Keith Baker, Kilo Bravo 1 Sierra Foxtrot, for being our feature this episode on our recording with AMSAT. So thank you very much for that there. Of course, we'd like to thank our donors this episode, our monthly and subscription donors who provide us with a base along the way, along with our anonymous donor and also Marcelino Jamali, I think it's pronounced, Kilo Mike 6 Echo Alpha Yankee. So thank you very much, guys, for being involved there. So what else have we got to suggest here? Guys, make sure you subscribe to our newsletter, icqpodcast.com. And if you want to send back your feedback, again, that's where you do. Click on the Contact Us form and you can send back your feedback to the show from that form. As I say, we greatly appreciate and love to read your feedback from the show. Check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/ICQ podcast for the videos we mentioned. The VMARS videos on there. So say if that's something of interest to yourself and you haven't come across that yet, it's under a group where the Newark Hamfest 2018 videos are in. If you're looking for a playlist where that one's in, that'll be where you'll find it. Right, I'm just trying to think. I think we've covered off everything, apart from the most important thing we have to do every week, which is get the kettle on and start making tea and biscuits, Dad. So I'll let you go and do your task.
Yeah, got to do that fairly shortly, Colin. But Mr. Howard dropped a bombshell on me. Well, actually, in the news, end of the news, he reminded me that this is my 299th, your 300th show, and my 299th. And I had to tell him that although I wasn't on one of the programs, I certainly did a lot of work in the background. So, our 300th episode, my 300th personally, will be next episode. But there you go. Right, I'm going to make your mum a cup of tea and find her a nice chocolate bicky for when she comes in. So, from work there, and we'll do it all again soon, won't we, Colin?
We certainly will, guys. Listen, we'll bid you all 73s, and as I say, we'll catch up again in a fortnight time for episode 301. We'll see you then. 73s all.
73.